Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. The Atlantic magazine publishes more texts between top Trump officials discussing Yemen attack plans. Russia says Western sanctions must be lifted before a maritime ceasefire with Ukraine can start. Prince Harry has announced he's stepping down from the charity Centobale after a row between its trustees and the chair of the board. Our top story. The Atlantic magazine has published more messages between senior White House officials that shows them discussing US airstrikes in Yemen on the encrypted chat app Signal. The magazine's editor, Jeffrey Goldberg, who was accidentally added to a chat in a major security breach, has said he's released more messages that he left out of his original article after the White House accused him of lying. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt has responded to the latest article by saying it's another hoax written by a Trump hater who is well known for his sensationalist spin. Yesterday, US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz said he took full responsibility for the group chat during an interview with Ingram Angle on Fox News. Let's take a look.
I take responsibility. I built the group.
Okay.
So but look, that's the part that we have to figure out. And that's the part that embarrassing, yes. But Pete and I are veterans. We know these operations. He has been an excellent Secretary of Defense. We're going to get to the bottom of it. I just talked to Elon on the way here. We've got the best technical minds looking at how this happened. But I can tell you for 100%, I don't know this guy. I know him by his horrible reputation, and he really is a bottom scum of journalists. And I know him in the sense that he hates the president, but I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone.
Let's go live to Washington now to speak to Saul Montes-Bradley, Vice President of Communications for the Gold Institute for International Strategy. Thank you so much for joining me. The Trump team are still attempting to shift the blame. Vice President J.D. Vance has again doubled down on defense, claiming the journalists oversold the story. What do you make of these attacks on Jeffrey Goldberg?
Good evening. Glad to be here. Well, I don't see these as attacks on Jeffrey Goldberg, but a fairly accurate description of his career so far. And to state the facts is not necessarily an attack. As we've just heard, Mike Waltz is admitted responsibility for creating the group, and we are yet to determine whether the inclusion of Jeff Goldberg was an oversight or whether it was done by a staffer on purpose. That we don't know yet. But in any case, that doesn't seem like an attack to me.
Aren't the Trump administration lucky, though, in many ways, that Jeffrey Goldberg had some integrity and came forward and didn't release all of the details initially? He actually showed good journalist initiative in many people's opinions.
Well, if Jeff Goldberg had any integrity, he would have taken himself out of the conversation when it was obvious he had nothing to do there. The fact that he tried to do a gotcha on the participants in that chat, who incidentally did not discuss any classified information, it speaks otherwise to his integrity.
The fallout from the Signal group chat scandal doesn't appear to be going away. How damaging is this war plan leak to the Trump administration?
I don't think it's going to be damaging at all. In about a week, we will have moved on to other pastures and new and more strident affairs, and this will be totally forgotten. The one thing that nobody can change is that, well, some of the comments may have been sophomoric in this conversation, there was no actual classified information discussed, no methods, no weapons, no specifics. And the attacks went on as scheduled and were a total success. So this will blow over in the next news cycle, I'm afraid.
New leaked messages show the US Defense Secretary detailing the Houthi strike plan in Signal. In the chat, we see times, we see dates, we see the weaponry. How would you classify the content of that chat? Do you think it's sensitive, top secret, or just sort of a chat between friends and the government almost?
Well, I'm afraid you're right on this one. There are no friendly chats among friends at this level. The content is sensitive, but not classified, and it's not specific. So sensitive but not classified puts it in a category where the harm is much less. Perhaps Vice President J.D. Vance's opinions on having to rescue Europe from itself is more damaging than anything they said about the Houthis.
So I was really wanting to ask you that. How damaging is this now for the US and its allies, especially when it comes to sharing sensitive information? Let's be honest, this isn't a good look for the Trump administration, is it?
No, I wouldn't think that it characterizes the entire administration. And while it is undoubtedly a red face out there, this kind of thing happens all the time. And there is nothing in the chat that other government officials around the world say, and worse, every day in conversations that are sometimes overheard. I don't think it's going to have legs.
Saul Montes-Bradley, Vice President of Communications for the Gold Institute for International Strategy. Thank you very much for your insights. And let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. Sudan's army has confirmed its control of Camp Taiba, the last base of the Rapid Support Forces in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum. The commander, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, announced from inside the presidential palace that Khartoum is free. This comes as the commander of Khartoum operations told Al Arabiya News that his forces took the capital's international airport. Now, at least 17 US strikes have hit Sada and Amran on Wednesday, according to Houthi media. The group's website claims American warplanes carried out aggressive air raids, causing material damage to citizens' property. No casualties have been reported. Washington previously promised to use overwhelming force on the Houthis until the group stopped firing at vessels in the Red Sea. At least 24 people have died after wildfires continue to rage through South Korea's southeast region. Authorities believe the majority of victims are in their 60s and their 70s. The fires, fueled by strong and dry winds, have forced more than 28,000 people to evacuate their homes. Thousands of people turned out to demonstrate in Turkey on Tuesday night for a seventh night of protest. More than 1,400 people have been detained in Istanbul so far over the arrest of the city's mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu. President Erdogan has urged patience and common sense amid what he described as very sensitive days. And the Oscar-winning director of an Israel-Palestine documentary has been released after being arrested by Israeli authorities earlier this week. Hamdan Balal, co-director of No Other Land, said he was attacked by Israeli settlers in his village in the occupied West Bank after he filmed them attacking a neighbour's house. Russia and Ukraine are continuing to accuse each other of trying to derail a US brokered deal that could stop fighting in the Black Sea. Meanwhile, Russia has said some Western sanctions must be lifted before a maritime ceasefire with Ukraine can start. For more on this, I'm joined from Global Affairs Analyst and former US diplomat at the United Nations, Jonathan Wachtel. Thank you, Jonathan, so much for joining me. So Donald Trump has actually said himself that Russia may be dragging its feet. Is Russia giving the US team the runaround?
Russia is doing what Russia wants to do, and that's Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir Putin has always wanted to have the Soviet Union returned, and certainly looks at Ukraine and doesn't see a sovereign nation, but instead sees a nation that should fall under complete territorial control of the Russian Federation as part of what historically in his mind is the Russian Empire. So there are just two different perspectives on this. So yes, I suppose, Leigh Ann, you could say that it's a go around Trump. It's actually just Vladimir Putin being Vladimir Putin in terms of what he's always espoused.
Russia has said its new ambassadors heading to Washington today as Kyiv and Moscow dispute the Black Sea ceasefire details. Does the Trump administration need to start applying more pressure on both sides? As you said earlier, Putin's going to do what Putin wants to do.
Yeah, Putin will do whatever is expedient for Putin. So if you give Putin an inch, he'll take in territorial gains 20% of Ukraine and will want to hold on to it as the beginning of what he would love to see as complete control of the country. In terms of the Black Sea fleet and not the Black Sea transportation and whatnot, obviously that's something that the Russian Federation would like to have to be able to get its agricultural products, including fertilizer, out to market and use, of course, the seaport that it enjoys now that it controls the Crimean Peninsula and has its Black Fleet able to function out of that port in Sevastopol easily. The Ukrainians, of course, also rely heavily on the Black Sea for their own, trade needs and transportation needs. It's their lifeline too. So it's expedient for both countries to enter a deal like this. The difference here is that Vladimir Putin really has certain agendas that he wants to carry out here, and he wants to ensure that if there is going to be a cessation of fighting and finally some sort of peace deal that would be worked out here, that it would be advantageous to Russia. And just how advantageous is something that Vladimir Putin right now, in terms of gains and in terms of ousting Ukrainian forces out of Kursk, which is part of the Russian Federation, and other movements, right now Russia seems to have the upper hand.
Can the US still be trusted by Europe after the war chat leak, do you think, Jonathan?
Look, certainly that's not a particularly pleasant thing to read if you're a European leader and looking at the United States as a partner. Certainly, there are comments in there that are, of course, worrying. But then again, let's be honest, Leigh Ann, the last weeks have signaled the very things that went out on that signal in terms of Europe needing to stand on its own 2 feet and stop relying on the United States for, carrying out some of the more major lift when it comes to military action, including some of the logistic needs that the Europeans certainly don't have the technological capabilities right now that the United States has in terms of surveillance and missile defense and other areas that the United States at the moment have supremacy.
Emmanuel Macron is actually meeting Zelensky again in Paris today. European allies are rallying around Ukraine. But as you said there, the US has a much stronger army, if you want to put it that way, military and intelligence. Is the US actually worried about all these meetings in Europe? Do they take any notice at all?
It depends on who you ask. If you're going to ask me, of course, I as an American and an American national who believes in the Constitution and what the United States was founded to espouse, I'm concerned about our leadership in the world, and we should be playing arguably a larger role in terms of world affairs, given our contribution historically. So giving away some of that control while Europe of course, should participate to the extent that the European nations want to do that. Certainly, the United States has earned the respect of the world in terms of a global power and having a say in international affairs. Losing some of that position is something that I certainly am not thrilled about. But then again, to each their own, and contribution should be respected.
Absolutely. And just one final thought from you. Donald Trump said he could end this war in one day. We haven't seen that happen, and we're still seeing attacks from both sides. Where do you think this is going to lead to? And do you think there will be peace eventually?
Eventually, yes, of course, Leigh Ann. This will one day stop. The guns will stop, and this tragic, now 3-year-long battle that really is so senseless when you really look at it, will be done. But it's going to take some time. And, a lot of things are said on campaign trails by Republicans and Democrats. And then, once you're sitting in the White House and you have the Department of Defense control and other, State Department, things get very complicated. Geopolitics is very complicated. Our relationship with Russia historically over decades has been deeply complicated. Our relationship with Ukraine, and now we're seeing, some tensions with Europe. It's going to take some time. It always was. Thinking that this would be accomplished within a day, we're seeing play out what reality is. The conflict is deeply, deeply complicated, and Ukraine could find itself in a position in which it has to, for an unknown amount of time, let Russia control 20% of its territory, and NATO participation may go away, if not entirely, certainly in such a time span that within your and my lifespan, it won't have happened. So there's still a lot of ground to cover here, a lot of painful concessions to be made.
Thank you so much for talking to me this evening. Global Affairs Analyst and former US diplomat at the United Nations, Jonathan Wachtel there. Thank you once again. Now, French President Emmanuel Macron will welcome Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky to Paris this evening ahead of a summit of European leaders tomorrow. The meeting follows the US announcement regarding a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine in the Black Sea made on Tuesday night. Earlier today, the European Union said it would not lift its sanctions on Russia before the unconditional withdrawal of Moscow's forces from Ukraine. We can now go live to Paris to speak to our correspondent there, Ross Cullen. Ross, thank you so much for joining me. Right, so the two men meet again. What's on the agenda this time?
Yeah, good evening, Leigh Ann. That's right, Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, is here in Paris meeting Emmanuel Macron this evening. The two men get a chance for one-on-one talks. This is the first time that Volodymyr Zelensky has been in Paris this year. He was here most recently in December for the reopening of Notre Dame, when there were trilateral talks between him, Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump. Just the bilateral talks on Wednesday evening, a one-on-one working dinner between the two presidents, a chance to lay the groundwork and really try to understand their positions ahead of tomorrow's summit, which the Élysée Palace has said will focus on the immediate strengthening of assistance to Ukraine, how a ceasefire can be implemented and extended, the modalities of long-term support for the Ukrainian armed forces, and the necessary security guarantees for Ukraine.
A lot on the agenda. Now, Ross, a senior aide to President Zelensky has said Ukraine needs troops who are ready to fight from Europe, not peacekeepers. And this, of course, comes ahead of that summit tomorrow. There is an argument they are not taking much action while we see some plans put in. Will we see some plans put in place in the next couple of days?
Leigh Ann, the whole idea of these boots on the ground that has been proposed most notably by London and Paris, by Sir Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, is very complex and is certainly not one which has seen unanimous support among all of the allies. It is incredibly complex when you put into motion the idea of Western troops inside Ukraine. However, Russia have already stated that that cannot happen. That is simply out of the question. Any troops from any NATO countries to be deployed inside Ukraine after any potential peace agreement. However, that is exactly what Ukraine seemed to suggest could well be worthwhile, having to try to police the ceasefire if it is put in place, that permanent peace deal. Certainly something that France and Britain are prepared to do, likely to be thousands of troops supplied by each country. However, many questions because if those troops are deployed to protect ports, airports and power plants and potentially in the centre or the relatively calm west of the country, the question is, can they be effective if the front line that needs monitoring is in the east of the country? What happens, for example, if British soldiers were fired upon or if a French military convoy was attacked? Would there be a right of reply? So there are many questions still to be answered, particularly by France and Britain and Ukraine, about how this reassurance force or this peacekeeping force made up of countries of the coalition of the willing, as the British Prime Minister is calling it. There are many questions to be answered about how all of the technicalities of such a complex deployment of soldiers inside Ukraine would work. That coalition of the willing has been building countries inside NATO but outside Europe, like Canada. For example, Australia have also said that they will be willing to join, and EU countries like the Netherlands, Finland and Denmark, for example, seem to be ready to play their part in potentially sending troops inside Ukraine. That is certainly one of the key questions that will be discussed by Volodymyr Zelensky and Emmanuel Macron this evening, and by the wider delegations of European heads of state and heads of government tomorrow.
Ross Cullen in Paris, thank you so much for joining me. Let's take a look at the top business news now. Tesla has announced it will launch in Saudi Arabia on the 10th of April. A launch event will take place at the Bajari Terrace in Riyadh, where Tesla's best-selling lineup will be showcased. Tesla, which is owned by the world's richest man, Elon Musk, already has several locations across the Middle East, including in the United Arab Emirates, Jordan and Qatar. The OBR has halved the UK growth forecast for 2025, according to the British Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who delivered her spring statement earlier today. Reeves revealed she was not satisfied with the numbers, but told MPs growth was forecast to improve in the next 4 years. In better news for consumers, British inflation slowed more than expected, with consumer prices rising by 2.8% in February after a 3% increase in January. Now to sports news. The Brazilian captain Marquinhos has apologised to the fans after an embarrassing thrashing by Argentina in Buenos Aires in the World Cup qualifiers. The current world champions ran away with the game in the first half, eventually beating Brazil 4-1, while Argentina have secured their spot for the 2026 World Cup. Brazil still has a lot of work to do to secure an automatic berth. Now, Prince Harry has announced he's stepping down from the charity Centrale after a row between its trustees and the chair of the board. The Duke of Sussex co-founded the organisation, which aims to help people in southern Africa living with HIV and AIDS in honour of his mother, Princess Diana. Harry's co-founder, Prince Sissoho of Lesotho, and the board of trustees have also resigned after the relationship with its chairwoman broke down beyond repair. I'm now joined by royal editor Sarah Heweson. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. So Prince Harry has said he's devastated and in shock to have quit as patron of the charity. What more do we know about the row that led to this fallout?
Hello to you, Leigh Ann. Well, this is an extraordinary row, and it has only intensified as the day has gone on. As Prince Harry said, he has had to take the unthinkable decision with a heavy heart to step down from the charity which he founded along with Princess of Lesotho in memory of their late mothers. Now, this has all come about because of a row that has emerged between the Board of Trustees and the chairwoman, Dr. Sophie Chandoka. There was a serious disagreement on the direction the charity should be taking. The Board of Trustees had wanted to vote the chair out, but she in turn had refused to step down and had said she was going to sue them, to take them to the High Court. That then meant the Board of Trustees had to step down, and Prince Harry and Princess as patrons decided to step down as well in support and solidarity of the trustees. Some of them among Prince Harry's closest friends, Mark Dyer, for example, his long-term mentor, described as his second father, who have been involved in the charity since its conception almost 20 years ago. And this evening we've had a statement, the first response to this from Centre Barley, Leigh Ann, where they seem to be saying that the charity doesn't need its patrons. Thanks very much for what you've done, but we're better off without you, is my interpretation of it. They say, while trustees are key for governance and regulation, and patrons, especially founders, are an honour to have, it is the people in the field who are advancing the work, no matter what.
And also, the chairwoman, Dr. Sophie Chandoka, has released her own strongly worded statement where she describes herself as a whistleblower. But what exactly, Sarah, do you think she was alluding to in this statement about the management of the charity?
Yeah, this is an extremely strongly worded statement from the chair. She talks about poor governance, weak executive management. She talks about bullying. She talks about misogyny and misogynoir, the discrimination of black women. She also makes a very thinly veiled attack at what appears to be Prince Harry when she talks about people playing the victim card and then using the very media that they disdain in order to take on someone who has challenged them. Given Prince Harry's battles, very well reported battles with the media, it does certainly seem that she is, without naming him, talking about him. So this row has become very dirty indeed, very nasty, and it is all playing out in the media. It is set to go to the Charity Commission, who are now investigating, and also to the High Court in London. So we haven't heard the last of this yet.
Sarah, that's something I wanted to touch on. It feels like every move Meghan and Harry make is watched and it's scrutinised by the world. What impact will this have on Harry's reputation? And I do know that you've met Prince Harry and been to Centre Barley. How do you think this will be feeling right now?
Look, this is Prince Harry's baby. This was really his coming-of-age project, the charity that he founded after he'd spent 2 months in Lesotho on his gap year back in 2004. I went out to Lesotho with him in 2008 to see the work that the charity was doing. And Harry was so passionate about this project. You could see his mother's legacy playing out there, the way that he was with the children, the pride that he had to be really making a difference in this field, helping orphans, helping victims of HIV/AIDS. And to lose that, to have to step down now amid this almighty blow-up, it will be absolutely devastating for Prince Harry. We don't really know what's gone on behind closed doors. So in terms of reputational damage, it's hard to say at the moment, but it's clear that there have been very, very serious problems going on behind closed doors.
The photographs are absolutely fantastic. You and Prince Harry both look very happy in them, I must say.
And much younger, considerably younger.
I was going to say younger, but then I thought, actually, we'll say happier, because happier, you know, it's probably slightly more polite than younger. But Sarah, just one other quick thought. King Charles and Queen Camilla have postponed their visit to see Pope Francis at the Vatican. This probably comes as no surprise, but what more do we know?
Yes. Now, this visit to Italy, which is taking place between the 7th and 10th of April, had been framed around a meeting with Pope Francis. The King had made it clear that because of the Pope's ailing health over recent months, he wanted to have this one particular potentially final meeting with Pope Francis. But I think for anyone who saw those images of Pope Francis when he left hospital and just how frail he is, it was clear that that visit was going to be very challenging. And on medical advice, it's been decided that the Pope does need to rest and that that meeting shouldn't take place. The tour itself, the state visit to Italy, will continue. They won't be visiting the Holy See, but they will continue with their visit to Rome and Ravenna. The programme will be adapted. But actually, it was about to be a very poignant visit for them because it coincides with the King and Queen's 20th wedding anniversary. And in fact, their wedding had to be delayed to April the 9th, 2005, because of the death of Pope John Paul II. And King Charles, as then Prince of Wales, had travelled to the Vatican to attend his funeral. So the timing of this was really significant, and they really wanted to have that audience with the Pope. Unfortunately, it's not now going to take place.
Sarah Heweson, young and old version, royal editor there. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
A reminder of our top stories. The Atlantic magazine publishes more texts between top Trump officials discussing Yemen attack plans. Russia says Western sanctions must be lifted before a maritime ceasefire with Ukraine can start. Prince Harry has announced he's stepping down from the charity Centre Barley after a row between its trustees and the chair of the board. And that's all from us on W News. Thank you so much for joining us. The dressing room is coming up next. And of course, don't miss Tom Burgess Watson with GNT. Good night.